SUI are not simply sitting on old files. Tips still come in, and detectives follow up on them individually, no matter how small or dated they appear. Some people who were questioned years ago have been re-interviewed, because time has a way of shifting memory and loosening what people are willing to say. Investigators are also working with outside experts, specialists in forensic science, genetic genealogy, and cold case methodology, to go through old evidence again with new eyes and new tools. The unknown male DNA found on JonBenét's clothing has been resubmitted for analysis using these modern techniques. While investigators have not publicly disclosed every detail of what those tests have found, there are indications that genetic genealogy has produced possible family connections, narrowing the field in ways that were not previously possible. Still, no one has been officially named as a suspect. No arrest has been made. The work is ongoing. JonBenét's father, John Ramsey, has remained vocal about his hope that the case will one day be solved. He has said repeatedly that today's DNA technology is far more powerful than anything that existed in 1996, and that if the evidence is tested thoroughly and properly, it should be possible to identify the person responsible. He has advocated for continuing re-examination of all available physical evidence and has supported the idea of interviewing again everyone who was connected in some way to the case. His position is that something important was likely missed, and that modern science offers the best chance of finding it. JonBenét's brother, Burke Ramsey, has also spoken out after many years of public silence. He expressed how deeply the family was affected by years of unfounded accusations and the often irresponsible handling of suspicion in the media and public discourse. He pointed to the early mistakes made by investigators as a source of compounding problems throughout the entire case, and he, too, has expressed support for renewed DNA analysis. Over the years, various documentaries and investigations have brought the case back into public conversation. One notable development involved a man who appeared to make statements suggesting he had been involved, describing an event that began as a planned kidnapping that went wrong and claiming he entered the house through the basement. These statements were not a formal courtroom confession, and no legal conviction has followed. Analysis of the ransom note allegedly found traces linked to this individual, though that too has not been adjudicated in a court of law. The legal process, in short, has not yet reached a final conclusion about this or any other possible suspect. Psychologists and behavioral experts who have studied the case over the years have offered observations about what the nature of the crime suggests about the person who committed it. The planning that appears to have been involved, the written note, the specific dollar amount, the apparent prior knowledge of the home, points to someone who had thought about this in advance rather than acting impulsively. Experts describe this kind of behavior as compartmentalized, a person who appears entirely ordinary to people around them while internally harboring something very different. Whether or not this profile has been matched to a specific individual, it remains part of the investigative framework. What makes this case so enduring is not only the tragedy at its center, but also the many layers of uncertainty that surround it. The crime scene was compromised early. The evidence, though significant, was not enough, at least not yet, to close the gap between suspicion and proof. The media coverage created a fog of competing narratives that made it difficult for many people to separate verified facts from theories. And a family at the center of it all spent decades living under public judgment for something they did not do. The search for truth in a case like this is not a simple process. It requires more than watching behavior in a documentary or reading into the tone of someone's voice. It requires physical evidence, careful analysis, and the kind of legal certainty that can withstand scrutiny in a courtroom. For all the progress that modern science has made possible, and for all the renewed energy that investigators and experts are bringing to the case, that standard has not yet been met. The case of JonBenét Ramsey remains open. Police continue to work. The family continues to hope. Somewhere in an evidence locker, samples from a crime scene nearly 30 years old are being run through technology that didn't exist when a little girl was killed. Whether or not those tests will finally produce an answer is something no one yet knows. But the work continues, and the question that has persisted since that December morning in Boulder remains, still waiting for the ANS. On the morning of December 26, 1996, a 6-year-old girl named JonBenét Ramsey was found dead inside her family's home in Boulder, Colorado. The discovery came in a quiet, affluent neighborhood where nothing about the outside of the house suggested anything had gone wrong. What followed was one of the most talked about, debated, and deeply frustrating criminal investigations in American history. A case that, nearly 3 decades later, remains officially unsolved. From the very first hours, the investigation was compromised. When police arrived at the Ramsey home that morning, they operated under the assumption that JonBenét had been kidnapped. A ransom note had been found inside the house, and that initial reading of the situation led officers to make a critical error. They did not fully secure the premises as a crime scene. In a proper investigation, the entire location would have been sealed off and treated as protected evidence. Instead, only certain parts of the house were restricted while other areas remained open. Family members, friends, and various individuals came and went throughout the morning. Evidence may have been touched, moved, or permanently disturbed without anyone realizing at the time. That early mistake would haunt investigators for years to come. The ransom note itself was one of the strangest pieces of evidence in the case. It was extraordinarily long, far longer than most ransom notes, which tend to be brief and direct. The amount demanded was $118,000, a highly specific figure that closely matched the bonus John Ramsey had recently received from his employer. Kidnappers who have no connection to a family rarely know or choose such precise amounts. Even more unusual, the note was written using materials found inside the Ramsey home. Handwriting experts were brought in over the years analyzed the note, but they were unable to reach consensus on who wrote it. At the bottom, the initials SBTC appeared. Their meaning has never been conclusively explained. Later that same day, John Ramsey found his daughter's body in the basement. JonBenét had suffered a severe head injury and had been strangled using a cord and a portion of a paintbrush handle. The violence of the attack made clear the event had taken place inside the house itself. Police also noted that there were no obvious, definitive signs of a forced break-in, though a basement window was found broken. A suitcase was discovered beneath that window, but its significance remained unclear. The house had no apparent signs of an intruder, yet the DNA found on the child's clothing did not belong to anyone in the family. That unknown male DNA became the most important physical clue in the entire investigation. At the time, DNA technology was far too limited to do much with such a small and degraded sample. Investigators were left with evidence that pointed clearly toward an unidentified outsider, but gave them nowhere to go with it. The case stalled. Years passed. Suspects were investigated and cleared. The family was subjected to intense public scrutiny and, at various points, outright suspicion. The parents, John and Patsy Ramsey, and their son Burke were all examined closely. The pressure on the family was enormous, and the investigation became tangled in public speculation, media coverage, and competing theories that were never substantiated by hard evidence. No one was ever charged. No one was ever convicted. Over the years, many people outside the family were also investigated. Some had lived near the house or had some prior connection to the area. Others came to police attention because of suspicious behavior or past criminal history. In every case, DNA testing and investigation cleared them. The file remained open. The sample remained unmatched, and the case became a kind of permanent fixture in the public consciousness. Always discussed, never resolved. What changed the story's direction, at least in terms of investigative possibility, was the advancement of DNA science. By the early 2000s and into the following decades, genetic testing had progressed dramatically. Techniques that once required large, clean samples could now be applied to trace amounts of degraded biological material. One of the most significant developments was a method called genetic genealogy, in which crime scene DNA is compared against large public ancestry databases. Millions of people voluntarily submit their DNA to services designed to help them discover relatives or trace family history. A criminal who has never given a sample to law enforcement may still have a relative whose DNA is already stored in one of these databases. By tracing those family connections, investigators can slowly build out a family tree and narrow down possible suspects. This method has successfully solved other long cold cases, and it was turned toward a Ramsey case with renewed hope. Police in Boulder have confirmed that the investigation